Bonjour, mon ami.
Welcome to another edition of the ProtoBalls podcast. I'm ProtoMet.
I am Barry.
But are you really?
I don't know. Well, for the purposes of this podcast, I'm the great detective Barry.
Today we will be taking a look at the first film adaptation of the Agatha Christie classic, Murder on the Orient Express.
So the Murder on the Orient Express, it's arguably her most famous novel?
While I've never read a Christie novel ever, if this movie is a good representation of it, it's completely understandable why it's one of her best.
It's arguably one of her best. It's a part of the sort of the detective series, which is Hercule Poirot, which is Agatha Christie's sort of take on like the Sherlock Holmes kind of formula. You know, if you've watched a Sherlock Holmes film or the 80s show, you get kind of a good idea about what Hercule Poirot is about. And
The 80s show?
There was an 80s Sherlock show.
Oh, okay.
The reason I don't reference the 2000s Sherlock show is because it's not good.
Which one?
The Benedict Cumberbatch one. The one that had a great a good first season, I would argue, and then it went downhill from there.
We're talking about Hercule Poirot, who had an A&E television series.
Yes.
Way different.
Way different.
It's actually how I know it's pronounced that.
Yeah.
Before even seeing this movie, I had seen ads for that show, and that's how I learned how to pronounce Poirot.
The book was originally published on the 1st of January, 1934, 91 years ago. So, and I believe, I could be wrong, give me just a second, Agatha Christie passed away in the 70s, which means that Hercule Poirot is still not in the public domain. It is still part of the Agatha Christie estate. Nevertheless, it is a very famous series of detective novels. It's it's the whodunits. If you've ever seen a detective novel, you've seen one, you've seen them all, but it's different in the way that it's approached. Like Sherlock Holmes, with Hercule Poirot and the Sherlock Holmes series, it's sort of allows the reader to come up with their own conclusions before the big reveal. It spoon feeds the reader enough information that they could maybe make a guess at who done it. Where unlike Murder She Wrote or Columbo,
which would occasionally just present evidence after the fact, as though.
Yes.
So I was like, well, there was no way I could have guessed that.
Yeah,
you were keeping that a secret.
Who could have guessed? Who could have guessed that?
I know I love you, but
those dang old how catch'ems. Shucks.
Columbo's a how catch'em.
Columbo's a how catch'em.
Murder She Wrote's a whodunit.
Yes.
So it's in the same vein as
Poirot and Sherlock,
but in execution, it's a bit wonky. Great series. I've recommended it before.
And Detective Conan. Conan is also a whodunit. Or is it a how catch'em?
AKA case closed. Hold up. I'm going to pause this. What were we talking about? Oh, case closed.
But who is phone?
Don't worry about it.
Dang. Hook, hand, car, hook, hand, door. Sorry, that's a famous copy pasta. Just like Who Was Phone is also a famous copy pasta. But yeah, case closed in America. In Japan, it's Detective Conan. They called it Case Closed just for the four. Was it for 4 kids? Was it on?
No, Funimation did the dub for that.
Okay, I see.
And I know Yeah, no, the manga also had the retitle. I don't know if the manga is still going here in the U.S. or not.
I wouldn't know.
I got into that series back when it was first starting to come out here, and I did not keep up, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Good series, but yeah. I think that's a series that is a good whodunit. I think it spoon feeds you enough information.
Right.
Granted, some of it would require you to actually know Japanese or other language to piece it together, but it doesn't present surprise evidence as far as I could tell.
Right. So the film here, the 1974. This is the 1974 adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express, and it's quite a star-studded cast. Just from, like, the most recognizable names that, we recognize, Ingrid Bergman, Martin Balsam, who has been on the podcast once before. He was the foreman in 12 Angry Men. Sean Connery is in this. We haven't really done a movie with him in it.
But it's Sean Connery.
It's Sean Connery, yeah.
I mean, you would know that wife beater from anything he was in.
God.
Am I wrong, though?
Anthony Perkins is in it as well.
Am I wrong?
I don't want to say anything. I'm not about to say anything. You can't make me. Vanessa Redgrave, she's a very famous actress. Lauren Bacall's a very famous actress. She's considered, in the top 20 actresses of the 20th century. So a lot of actual star-studded casts and a lot of Academy Award.
Yeah, actually, the poster we're using for this podcast actually has the tagline "The Who's Who of Whodunit."
No kidding. For the 70s, you couldn't ask for a better cast. Nevertheless, it stars Albert Finney as our main character, Detective Poirot. And if you the premise is actually really simple. It's a whodunit on a train. God, where have we seen that before? It's almost like it's been done to death now. And it all started from this book and from this movie that it started a lot of it got the ball rolling. If
I recall correctly, I think this is a closed circle type mystery.
Yes, it's a closed circle because
all the characters are isolated in one specific place, so the murder occurs in that one specific place, so the murderer can't go anywhere, and there's nobody from outside who could potentially leave.
Right. The other thing is that this film was directed by Sidney Lumet, who once again makes a return on the podcast, as he also did 12 Angry Men, which explains why Martin Balsam's also in this movie. He likes his actors coming back for films. So I suppose just another thing is that Ingrid Bergman actually won the Academy Award for this film for Best Supporting Actress, and then it also received 5 other nominations for Best Actor for Finney, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Original Score, Best Cinematography, and Best Costume Design. It's a very nice looking film.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, I suppose we should start with the inciting incident of
the Lindbergh baby kidnapping.
Wrong one.
Oh, sorry. The Daisy Armstrong kidnapping / murder.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, it's the Lindbergh kidnapping.
That is true. This is the opening sequence and the inciting incident of both the film and the book is heavily inspired by the Lindbergh kidnapping, which had happened like 2 years previously. And it was, for those who don't know, Charles Lindbergh, the famous aviation pilot who was the first man to fly across the Atlantic, he had his newborn kidnapped, and then I believe was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
yeah, and it was just a horrible.
Or no, wait, that was Abe Simpson. Sorry, he.
Goo goo gaga.
I miss my fly dad now.
I'm the Lindbergh baby. Goo goo gaga. A little bit of A, a little bit of B.
A little from column A, a little from column B.
That's a Simpsons joke. If that wasn't obvious enough.
But yeah, no, that was an absolutely tragic event that occurred.
Yeah, it was a big deal, and I don't think Lindbergh ever recovered. I think he died a couple of years after that. Let me actually look quick. He died. He died in the 70s as well. But
yeah, for all intents and purposes, the kidnapping and murder that occurs at the beginning of the film may as well be the Lindbergh baby kid.
Couldn't call it the Lindbergh kidnapping because that's really what it is. But yes.
I mean, we'll still refer to it as the Armstrong case. Yes. Later on, because it is important.
Yes, and it's a toddler. Daisy Armstrong is kidnapped and murdered by an unknown assailant and a couple of his accomplices. But the maid is accused of having been involved in the case.
Though she is acquitted of any wrongdoing.
She's acquitted of any wrongdoing, but she ends up committing suicide in the aftermath because of the
stress that resulted.
The stress and the trauma of it. And then the butler was also incapacitated. The caretaker was tied up, and then the chauffeur was also implicated in the incident, though nothing ever came of that. And so it's a bunch of gears that are loosened out that will come together at the end of the film. It all tracks because all the information that we're given, it all seems like, okay, this is all related, but we're not sure how and why we need this information until later in the film.
So the movie jumps ahead like 5 years.
Yes, to December 1935, which begs the question, is The Murder on the Orient Express a Christmas film? Answer in the comments. It takes place in Christmas, and there's lots of snow.
So we missed this by a month.
Yeah, no kidding. So Hercule Poirot is in Istanbul, formerly
not Constantinople.
Damn it, you beat me to it.
Yes.
Son of a bitch. And he is he finished up with like a big case in Turkey, but he's heading back to London because I believe he's got another case waiting for him there. So he's trying to travel from Istanbul to London, and he's going to be taking the Orient Express.
And because he's a friend of the guy who owns the train,
Brauch, Monsieur Bauch.
I'm trying to remember. I think he's just the owner of the train. But
yeah,
because he's a friend of.
He's the director of the Compagnie Internationale des Wagons, which is the train, the
president of the company.
The president of the company who owns the Orient Express.
And because he's a friend of the guy, he gets a ride on this otherwise packed train.
Essentially what happens is Poirot is like, I need to book a room on the Orient Express, and Brauch is like, I can't do that. It's full. It's full somehow in winter of all things. And like Poirot and Brauch are like, Poirot and Bouch are like, what the fuck?
But they do learn that there is an empty berth.
Yes.
And so he's able to finagle that for Poirot.
And the reason that they do manage to give Poirot that that room is because he's planning on stopping in Romania, and then getting on a different train back to London. So the Orient Express is going from Istanbul to Romania to the capital of Romania, I believe. I can't remember.
Belarus?
No. Belarus is a country north of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a B name.
Budapest is Hungary. It might be like Bravo or something like that.
Romania, right?
Yeah. Nevertheless, we have, 12, 13 people on the train.
Bucharest,
yes.
That's why I was thinking Budapest. They have the same start and end syllables.
Yes. Yup. So we have several interesting characters, to say the least. So we have a Mr. Just going in no particular order. We have a Mr. Samuel Ratchet, who's a wealthy businessman of sorts. We have Dr. Stavros Constantine. He's a Greek physician who's traveling on the Orient Express to Romania for undetermined business. We have Miss Caroline Hubbard, an American eccentric, to put it mildly.
I'd call her a chatterbox.
Well, yes. We have Mary Debenham, an English governess, returning from Baghdad. And then Colonel John Arbuthnot, a colonel who is in love with Miss Debenham. We have a Princess Natalia Dragomirov, a Russian princess. A Hector McQueen, Mr. Ratchet's secretary of sorts. And then a Countess Helena Andrij, who is a countess, a German countess. German or Hungarian, I believe.
I don't remember offhand.
I think she was. I think she was Hungarian. And then a Count Rudolf Andrejnich. Oh no, okay, so that's right. So Rudolf is the Hungarian. Helena is German.
I thought it was Elena.
We'll get to that later.
What?
We'll get to that later.
I'm so confused. Anyway.
Yes. And then we got Antonio Foscarelli, who is a car salesman. He's an Italian American car salesman. We got Greta Olsen, who is a Swedish missionary, who's very how shall we say, very
not politically correct by today's standards.
Yeah, let's go with that. I was gonna say very evangelical.
That is also true of her. I was thinking more like the words she used.
Oh, yes. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to that in a little bit. And then we have Hildegard Schmidt, who is Princess Dragomirov's German maid. We have Edward Henry Mastersman, who is Mr. Ratchet's English valet. And we have Cyrus Hardman, who is an American ex-policeman who is
here for reasons.
He doesn't really play much into the plot, all that much, but he does claim later on that he is a member of the Pinkertons. Yes, that Pinkertons. If the ones that went after a guy for Yu-Gi-Oh cards, I believe it was, or was it Magic the Gathering cards? I forget which one.
I couldn't tell you offhand because I think this is the first time I'm hearing about it.
Yeah, this was maybe last year or 2 years ago, where I believe it was Wizards of the Coast sent the Pinkertons after somebody who had Magic the Gathering cards that were obtained by, let's just say, less than
legal means.
Less than legal means. And if you've also played Red Dead Redemption 2, yeah, it's those Pinkertons as well. Yes, they're a real company. Yes, they're bastards. Alright, anyways. And then we finally have Mr. Pierre Michel, who is the French train conductor. So that's all of the characters. It's a lot of characters that we have to keep track of.
It is a whodunit, though. So
it is a whodunit, and we'll try our best. Okay, we'll try our best to keep track of everything. So we're introduced to all of these characters, right? And Mr. Ratchet, who's maybe the most seedy out of all of them, he invites Mr. Poirot to his
Perro.
Shh. Yes, Perro.
Mr. Perro.
Mr. Perro.
It's Poirot.
It's mon ami. It's Poirot. Oh, Poirot. All right. Yes. So he invites Mr. Poirot, Detective Poirot, to his table in the dining car, and he cuts to the point rather quickly because he figures he doesn't want to waste, Mr. Detective Poirot's time, and so he essentially lets.
I don't think it's so much that he doesn't want to waste Poirot's time. Poirot doesn't want his time wasted.
Well, yeah, both works. But he essentially says, "Hey, I've got a job for you. There's people who want to kill me or are threatening my life, and I'm willing to pay you money to just sort of be my bodyguard. Because who would want to kill me when I'm being protected by, a world-famous detective?"
And Poirot refuses.
Yep, Poirot does not give a shit.
It's like, I'm not interested in that. I have acquired enough money to live comfortably.
Yeah.
I'm fine. But good luck on the not getting killed.
Yeah, good luck on the not getting killed thing, bud.
Womp womp womp.
Womp 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 womp. Sorry, that's a... God. Is that that's not what is
Price
it?
is Right?
Price is Right. I think
Maybe?
yes, I think that's Price is Right. That's the ice climber one. Where if you go too far, the ice climber falls off the cliff. And you don't.
So yeah, spoilers. This guy winds up dead the next morning.
Yeah, and
though the night is not without some incident. As Poirot winds up being woken up a couple times during the night.
Yeah, so Mrs. Hubbard wakes up everybody, and he sort of accidentally wakes up Mr. Poirot by talking to Michelle, the conductor, and explaining
about a man who just showed up in her room.
Yeah.
Without explanation and then fled.
And we're going to stick a pin in that for now. And then there was also Poirot getting woken up by somebody walking down the hallway in a very
fancy-looking night robe.
Yes, in a very fancy-looking nightgown. And so we have two pieces of information.
Oh, and Ratchet just kind of being a bit of an asshole because he was having a nightmare.
Oh, yes, that's right. Ratchet was rude to his secretary and to his basically his valet, his butler, essentially. Shucks. Hold on, give me a second. To his butler and valet, which would be.
Yeah, now I kind of got to pull up the.
Yeah, Mr. Masterman. Yes, Mr. Masterman. Sorry, there's a lot of characters. It's hard to remember everybody's name.
Yeah.
Especially when we should have written everyone down on a note. But nevertheless, we have three pieces of information throughout the night that Poirot makes a mental note of, sort of. And then, of course, Mr. Ratchet is found murdered the next day. What a twist! And so,
he has Pierre go get. He has make sure Pierre doesn't touch anything, and has him go get Bulk and
yeah,
Constantine.
Yeah, he gets Bulk and Dr. Constantine, and so it is essentially established through the investigation that Mr. Ratchet was drugged and then stabbed
12 times.
12 times.
Now, the reason this is a closed circle sort of case is because of a snowstorm the night before. They are stuck until a plow can come through and get them free.
Yes, and Bulk. We're gonna call him Bulk for now. We're just gonna go with that. Bulk essentially is trying to explain to everybody that, like, hey, sorry, this is just stuff that we can't account for sometimes because winter can be rough on the railroad, and so they're stuck in the snow for the duration of this investigation. And so
I think he mentions that to all the passengers before they find Ratchet.
Before they're summoned to Ratchet. So Mr. Ratchet's been drugged and stabbed 12 times. Poirot makes a mental note of this. 12, being stabbed 12 times and also being drugged. And so
he asks Pierre to get him a hat box and a couple other items. A large hat box.
Correct.
And in using that, he finds he locates a charred piece of paper, and using a lighter he uses to melt mustache wax for himself, uses that and the two frames of the hat from the hat box to get a glimpse of what was written on one of the letters that Ratchet had burned.
Yeah.
And through that, they are able to find the words AISYARMS.
And so, I mean, pretty simply, it's at this point Hercule Poirot sort of figures out who Mr. Ratchet actually is.
Turns out Ratchet is actually Cassetti, the American gangster who kidnapped and murdered Daisy Armstrong.
And so the wheels begin to turn in Mr. Poirot's head and Detective Poirot's mind. The machinations of his mind are an enigma, as the inestimable Patrick Starr would say. So he summons each of the characters one by one to sort of get their sides of the story, sort of get their alibis and whatnot. And so
he first has Masterman called in to first inform him of his boss's death.
Well, Masterman was the one who discovered him, and it was him, Poirot, and Michelle that had discovered Cassetti. And so Poirot finds Cassetti's broken watch, which is marked at 1:15, and so he concludes that Cassetti had to have died between midnight and 2 o'clock at some point.
Okay, so the first person they call in is Hector McQueen. I got the two characters confused.
Yeah. McQueen.
To not only inform him of his boss's death, but also to reveal his true identity, which McQueen, upon returning to the other guests, informs them because he's quite a chatterbox.
Yeah.
In that regard.
And so Poirot sort of discovers sort of everybody's little
idiosyncrasies,
essentially. And so he invested. He asks everybody, several questions, and
a lot of them relating to the Armstrong family, or to their personal reasons for traveling.
And essentially, the order of events from the Armstrong kidnapping do play into what's happening today, not only because of Cassetti, but essentially, Sonia Armstrong, Daisy's mother, was pregnant with a second child, but went into premature labor and died.
While miscarrying.
And then Colonel Armstrong killed himself in his grief.
And as previously mentioned, their maid, who was wrongfully accused of participating in the kidnapping, committed suicide.
Only to be found innocent afterwards.
Well, I think she was found innocent afterwards and then killed herself.
Either or doesn't.
Either way, that's 5 deaths.
That's 5 deaths. And Cassetti had actually gotten away with it through a technicality.
And his partner got caught.
Yeah.
But he managed to elude justice.
And so,
So it becomes clear that that's the motive for the murder. It's blatantly obvious once they figure that out. It's just then a question of, well, then, who did it?
And so he first investigates McQueen, and he discovers that McQueen is involved somehow because McQueen knows about the notes. He knew about the notes that Cassetti was receiving, but
he didn't know the contents of all the notes because some of them were anonymous, and Ratchet preferred to read those himself.
Right. And McQueen also, sorry. And then, he also, Miss Hubbard also, gives sort of an explanation that she thinks the killer was in her cabin that night, which is the heretofore unidentified man in her room.
All I really know is that it was somebody wearing a uniform from somebody working on the train due to one of the buttons that was left behind.
Correct. And
they deduce that it's not Pierre because he's got all his buttons.
Correct. They don't think it's Pierre. Pierre's uniform is very well kept. And so they are not... Poirot is sort of still having to investigate what's going on. And so...
Systematically, he goes through every one of the potential suspects and asks them about such and such.
Yeah. And so, while everybody sort of gives their alibi, Poirot also notes that some of them had noticed the woman in the kimono, the fashionable dress, walking down the hallway in the middle of the night. But no one admits to owning it. And so
none of the women have one.
Yep. And so,
and it's actually while helping out what's the handmaiden.
Yeah. And
Hildegard.
Yeah.
While helping her get something out of her trunk, they find the suit that was missing the button.
And the reason that they went to Hildegard is they had actually gone to the princess to sort of
Dragomirov to ask her because she knew the Armstrongs.
Not only knew the Armstrongs, as it turns out, she was Sonia Armstrong's godmother. And so Poirot asks Princess Dragomirov several sort of basically leading questions to basically like, what was the maid's name? What was the chauffeur's name? What was the butler's name? What was the maid's name?
I kind of like how, like, like for the first two questioning situations, Bulk is like, after it's done, is like, they did it.
Yep. He's just like, they did it. It was
got the murder.
It was totally them. It was totally them.
Basically, preemptively one-upping the audience.
Another thing he ends up noticing is that one of the characters, the Countess Andrenij, her passport is smudged.
A bit of oil.
With a bit of oil. And so he does question the Count and the Countess. And so it's like he sort of he gets that corrected by getting the Countess to spell out her name because it's missing
the first letter.
Yeah, it's missing the first letter of her
which
name.
Poirot is hoping he could find out that information to figure out who owns the fancy handkerchief that was found in the room, in Ratchet's room.
Well,
with the monogrammed H on it.
Yes. And then Hubbard once again comes back having found the murder weapon as well.
And getting her fingerprints all over it.
And with her fingerprints all over it. Gee, golly shucks.
And I guess Poirot figures, well, if she's got her fingerprints all over it, may as well get mine on there too.
Yeah.
It's already compromised, so we'll never actually figure out who held it.
No kidding, right? And so,
did fingerprint evidence even exist at the time?
In the 30s? Maybe in its infant form. So,
Goo goo gaga.
Goo goo gaga. And so, right about here, I would say, let's go ahead and, pause for a minute.
Okay, click.
Yeah. and then we'll get into basically the meat of the story, the big reveal, essentially. So we're going to pause here and give your honest thoughts on this movie so far.
Like I said at the beginning, there's a reason why this is probably Christie's most famous story. And having not watched it until for this podcast, I can definitely understand why the name kept popping up. It's incredibly well done.
Yeah, it's the setup is remarkable. The payoff is totally worth it. It's something that not a lot of stories have ever done before.
I would say that the reveal is both complicated but not convoluted.
Yeah,
it could have very easily become convoluted, but it manages to.
It has a lot of moving parts, but if you're paying attention and you follow along, it makes sense. And it's not convoluted to it's not convoluted to the point where it's like, really? Come on.
It's complicated, but not convoluted.
Yeah. Who's your favorite character? There's a lot of good characters in the movie.
I mean, I'll probably go with Poirot.
Well, yeah, see, Poirot's kind of an asshole, though, but that's just how Agatha Christie wrote him.
He doesn't really come across as an asshole to me. Maybe it's just my reading of it.
Well, the way that, maybe it doesn't show in this movie, and it probably won't show on Murder on the Nile either, but the way that Agatha Christie writes Hercule Poirot is sort of like if Sherlock Holmes was arrogant. You know what I mean? Like Hercule knows he's the best, and he does not shy away from flaunting that fact. Whereas, Sherlock's more humble. He's a very eccentric detective, but he's also generally well-meaning and sociable and polite, for lack of a better term. Whereas Poirot, like earlier in this movie, he'll be blunt with people. He'll be like, "I'd like to be left alone."
No, when Hubbard comes up to have a chat with him and Bulk leaves,
yeah,
Poirot's like, "Well, he's like what Greta Garbo says in like Greta Garbo in that one movie. Some people just want to be left alone." And then he gets up, and then she leaves.
Yeah, she leaves, getting the hint. But he's also blunt with people when he just says, "This doesn't interest me. I'm leaving." Like with Cassetti's offer of a job. I like Sean Connery's character. His character is that of sort of an English colonel who's very much in love with Miss Debenham. And he's very overprotective of her, to the point where there's a scene where
Poirot kind of gets a titch aggressive towards her when trying to find something out, and he basically storms in to interrupt it.
Essentially, what Poirot does is he baits Sean Connery's character into divulging more information than he should have. As in essence, he gets aggressive with Miss Debenham to get Connery's character aggressive, which is a brilliant play on Poirot's part. I like Anthony Perkins' character too. I like Bo. I like Boke. Boke's cool. He's a fun character.
This has got a lot of great characters.
The princess, she's pretty good, especially her two dogs. And
I forgot she had two dogs.
Yeah, the two dogs that Hercule basically hands to Boke, and Boke
picks him up off the scene, hands him to Boke, and sits down in their spot.
They both show up into the princess's cabinet, and essentially Boke is like, "I would like a cognac, please," because they're offered booze. Hercule doesn't want any, but what Boke would like some. And then Hercule grabs the two dogs, hands them to Boke, and then Hildegard hands the cognac to Boke. So he's juggling two dogs in both his arms and a glass of cognac. But it's all like I would say that the best way to describe this movie, it's a closed circle whodunit, but also a cat and mouse game, where not to spoil anything, but every character who is not Poirot, Boke, and the Doctor is trying to outsmart all three. But Poirot, being the intelligent master detective that he is one step ahead of everyone. Or at least he figures everything out about halfway through the movie, and then he's just collecting more information to piece everything together. Because he has a working theory that we will reveal in a bit. But the working theory is that somebody snuck aboard the train, murdered Ratchet, and then left. Which would explain the messed up suit and the kimono. So, any other characters that you like?
Like I said, it's got a lot of great characters.
Yeah.
Poirot just kind of stands out because he's, the main character.
That's true. What's your favorite scene? Or is it the finale?
I'd go with the finale.
Yeah.
That goes places, but...
That's a trip. That's a trip.
Like, it's really hard to beat the climax of this film.
Yeah. Anything you didn't like about the film?
Can't really say, to be honest.
I mean, it's hard, like, with a whodunit. There's not a lot of time you can waste on films like that. And I think Murder on the Orient Express treads the line very well between giving us great cinematography and then getting us the meat.
I do think that like the last couple characters that get questioned do kind of get feel a bit rushed through. We don't get as much information about them as we do most of the other characters.
Right, exactly.
But I think that's more because Poirot's figured stuff out and he doesn't need to ask them about much.
I think probably the one scene that we were both a little
oh yeah,
a little uncomfortable with was Miss Greta Olson's interrogation, where she mentions that she was
for the record, her English isn't so great, so she uses some rather colorful words to talk about African children.
Yes.
It's like, I am not going to repeat it here because it's like...
She doesn't say the N-word, but it's a little...
But it's like, whoa,
come on, guys. Let's relax a little bit.
It's like, wow.
Yeah. And then, yeah, like... Yeah, I do know what you mean by, like, the last couple of characters feeling a bit rushed. Because, like Antonio and Cyrus, they're both, like, a couple of the last characters interviewed. And they're extremely rushed. Like, we do not get much from them at all.
I think Poirot really only gets as much as he needs and then moves on. I mean, I couldn't say how they're handled in the book because I've never read a Christie book. So, maybe they were rushed through in the book as well.
Right. That may be. I don't know, for all it's worth.
I mean, Foscarelli, just on his own, just feels kind of, why is this character here? Sort of.
I mean, yeah, it does get like revealed later why he's here, and
right.
he does play a big role in it.
But I'd say Cyrus feels more significant to the plot than Foscarelli.
Right. Heck, I even like McQueen's involvement here. His also makes a ton of sense when his whole backstory is revealed, which we will get into in a couple of minutes. But do you have any recommendations?
What do you rate the film first?
Oh, I rate it like a solid 8, 8.5.
8 is a good. I agree with that.
Yeah, it's a really good film. It's it's not like I wouldn't call it a masterpiece, but I would definitely call it like this is a movie I would watch multiple times if given the chance.
Like I said after we got finished watching the movie. Now I understand why this is, like, such a hallmark of the murder mystery genre.
Yeah.
It's like, it works incredibly well.
See, yeah, and ProtoMet hasn't seen it yet. I actually do prefer Murder on the Nile a little bit more. That one is, I dare say, a little more fun. But this one is this one's the hallmark of, the whodunit films. It's almost... I would say it is almost as much of a hallmark as Hound of Baskervilles, the Sherlock story, which is also an excellent story for anyone who either wants to read it or watch it. I would definitely recommend either the 1939 film with Basil Rathbone or the 80s version with I think his name's Gregory Brett, I think. I forget his name. Okay, recommendations?
I've recently gotten back into watching Code Geass, Lelouch of the Rebellion, a mecha series that is very easy to forget that it's a mecha series, because holy hell, the characters and the plot and the drama is absolutely fantastic. It is a series set in an alternate timeline in which Britain became the Britannian Empire and went on to conquer most of the world. And prior to the start of the series, they conquered Japan, and as per their tradition, they renamed it to a number along with all of its people. So it's no longer Japan, it's Area 11. And the people are no longer Japanese, they're 11s.
That's dumb.
That is dumb. And the whole point is that the whole empire is a bunch of assholes. But Lelouch is a former prince of the Britannian royal family who was ousted after his mother was killed and fled to Japan with his now blind and wheelchair-bound little sister to basically go into hiding, essentially. And now it's years later, Britannia has conquered Japan, subjugated its people, oppressed them, and he winds up finding a girl who gives him the power to command people to do things. And so he uses that to side with the terrorists who are trying to liberate Japan, to basically enact his own plot to take revenge on the Britannian royal family. And notice how at no point have I mentioned any of the mechs. Because they are even more tools than in Gundam.
Nice.
Like, it took me a while after finishing the first season to realize, and this was mostly because I read it on a TV Tropes article about fridge logic.
Yeah.
That basically led me to realize this is a mecha series that works just as fine if it didn't have any mecha, because the manga adaptation completely lacks mecha, but still tells the same plot. So I keep having to remind myself, oh yeah, this is a mecha series. And it's certainly not for kids. It has nudity, it does have some intense imagery. Nothing too graphic because it was on television, but just absolutely horrible stuff. And there's one scene during the first season that's like, oh, I was certainly not expecting, and it is incredibly uncomfortable. But I can honestly say that after I finished watching the first season, I was mad because of how incredibly well done the cliffhanger was. I was mad because the season was over. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten around to watching the second season, but that is going to change. I will be watching that because I'm rewatching the entire series, and it is absolutely incredible. Got a great voice cast. Fantastic characters. It does get a bit silly at times, but those are more the moments of levity between the more intense parts. I mean, god damn. This show goes to some really intense places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine. Yeah, Code Geass. Yeah.
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 What about you? What's your recommendation?
Tell you what, this one's a little dated. This one's a bit dated, especially in hindsight. But I'm gonna go ahead and recommend That 70s Show.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a comedy from the late 90s to early 2000s. It's a show set in the 70s, of course, and it revolves around the Foreman family
and associated friends and neighbors.
Yes. There's the main character, Eric Foreman, and then parents Kitty and Red Foreman, and then dumbass. My foot's going up your ass. On again, off again girlfriend, Donna. Sorry, I couldn't remember the last name. It's an Italian name. Her parents, Bob and Midge, and then also other assorted friends. There's Stephen Hyde, who we don't talk about, especially nowadays in hindsight.
Kelso.
There's Kelso,
played by the now famous Ashton Kutcher. This was his breakout role.
This was his breakout role, and then he also did Dude, Where's My Car, and that got him a bit more famous. Even though it's not a particularly good movie.
What's his girlfriend's name?
Played played by
Mila Kunis.
Yeah, Mila Kunis.
Who was actually underage when she got the role.
That is true.
She lied about when she would turn 18. She did tell the guys who were hiring her that she would be 18 on her birthday. She just didn't say which birthday.
Jackie Burkhart.
There we go.
Yeah, and this was before she did
Family Guy.
This was before she did Family Guy, which funnily enough, she's not the first voice actress for Meg. She's actually the second. Shockingly. There's also Fez, and that rounds out the main group actually. And then it's mostly them as teenagers getting up to hijinks, doing dumb shit, and
in the 70s.
In the 70s, and of course, Red Foreman threatening to kick people's asses, or calling them dumbasses, or being the typical 50s and 60s dad. The stereotypical, World War II era dad, where he's hard-nosed, strict, no-nonsense, doesn't put up with bullshit.
He's not the traditional sitcom dad. He's the new traditional sitcom dad.
Yeah, the asshole dad, as it were. Except Red does actually love his kids. He just doesn't show.
He's it's hard love.
It's hard love. Tough love, as it were. But there's moments where he shows how much he appreciates, his son and daughter.
And what really works for the series is that, yes, it takes place in the 70s, and yes, it'll reference stuff and event like pop culture and events from the 70s, but it still works as a sitcom that could have taken place in the 70s.
Right.
It's not resplendent with pop culture and timely references, though it does have those.
Yeah.
It does a fantastic job of focusing on these characters, and the time that the series is set in is kind of secondary.
Yeah.
Something which they absolutely failed with that 80s show and that 90s show.
Well, that 90s show is actually alright. It's just a shame it got canceled after the second season. It's what it is.
Which is more than that 80s show got.
That's true. Or what about the UK version of that 70s show?
I do not know anything about that.
That's right. That's because it only lasted 10 episodes before it got canceled. Yeah. Yep. Days Like These is what it was called. It was on ITV, and it was canceled after 6 episodes, and only 10 of the 13 produced episodes were aired. Yeah, that's how bad it was. You can't. To an extent, that 90s show, it's slightly different because it has most of the same characters that 70s show has, but it's a different sort of story that they want to tell in that series, whereas Red's less of an asshole in that one because he's a grandfather now and he's mellowed out with age.
Typical grandparent. Tough on the kids, absolutely light-handed on the grandkids.
Well, and you know what's funny is that Kitty's the one that plays the Red role now in that show, where she's much more strict with the grandchildren, and Red is just it's the grandkids, it's fine, we'll be all right. And there's even a scene where Kitty goes to Red and she's like, "Is this what it was like for you all this time?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah. I kind of like it." Yeah, that 90s show goes for sort of a different story that they want to tell, but that 70s show is largely about it's a character show. It's not a plot-driven show. There's no long-term there is long-term storytelling. Things do change, but at the same time, it's a sitcom, so not a whole lot of permanent changes that happen except for in finales and whatnot. So, and it's good for like the first 6 seasons, and then it falls off a cliff when Topher Grace leaves, as is the public opinion on it.
Yeah, don't they replace him with a brand new character?
Yeah, they try to at least, and it doesn't work out.
Doesn't Topher Grace come back then?
He comes back for the finale because they figured might as well just pay a bunch of money to get Topher Grace back. But yeah, that's the film for you, or that's that '70s show for you. So, enough about that '70s show and enough about Code Geass. We want to talk about Murder on the Orient Express. Segueing back into that now.
Okay.
Speaking of kicking ass, Hercule Poirot. So he calls everyone together now. He gathers everybody. He's interviewed all the characters, and he gets the chance to finally work his magic. And he
informs them that he's got 2 running theories. One is that a rival gangster snuck aboard the train, disguised himself as a worker on the train, and murdered Ratchet, and then fled before they could find the body. But that's just the simple explanation. He's got a second, more complicated explanation.
Yes. And so he goes on to explain that all of these characters are connected in one simple way. They're all related by the same incident that got Mr. Cassetti killed. For example, Mrs. Caroline Hubbard, who is actually the American actress Linda Arden, who the princess Natalia Dragomirov had actually mentioned by name while she was being interrogated. Yes, Mrs. Hubbard is actually, yes, Linda Arden, who is Daisy Armstrong's maternal grandmother, and is Mrs. Armstrong's mother.
And Countess Helena Adreni is actually Sonia's sister.
Yes.
So she is Arden's other daughter.
And how did Poirot figure this out? Well, as it turned out, the princess had actually, I believe it was either the princess Natalia Dragomirov, or it was Hildegard, who had mentioned that one of the tertiary characters' names was Grunwald. And what is Grunwald in English? Greenwood. And what was Helena's
maiden name?
Maiden name? Grunwald, which is Greenwood, which is tied to the Armstrong family. And so it turns out that Helena Andrenich is Sonia Armstrong's sister.
And by extension, Rudolph is basically Sonia's brother-in-law.
Yes. And that makes him Linda Arden's son-in-law. So then we have Mary Debenham, and what's her connection? She was the governess of the family. And what about Colonel John Arbuthnot? Well, he was the Colonel's friend, close personal friend.
He just happens to be in love with Debenham. That's incidental to the whole thing.
Of course. But of course, Natalia Dragomirov, we already know, is Sonia Armstrong's godmother and a very close personal friend of Linda Arden.
And one of the more telling aspects of Poirot's interview is how she basically avoids answering any of his questions by claiming, oh, well, I had my own attendants there, so I didn't even bother interacting with theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, she deflects. She continually deflects the answers onto onto something else, essentially. Like, oh, I wouldn't know. I had my own servants. Oh, I had my own chauffeur. I didn't talk to them. Oh, I never talked to the servants. Which Poirot, I mean, pretty much points out as, yeah, no, that's bullshit. Considering you were not only Sonia's godmother, but you were Linda Arden's close personal friend, you would have been at the house multiple times. You would have known these people. You would have talked to these people.
But then, who is Hildegard Schmidt? Why, she is the Armstrongs' former cook.
And how does Poirot figure that out? It is because he catches her on a contradiction, where he essentially like flatters Hildegard by basically saying, "You're not only a great maid, I hear you're a great cook too."
Which she falls into the trap before catching herself and
yeah, and realizes that she fucked up. So Hildegard was the Armstrongs' former cook. Greta Olson was Daisy Armstrong's nurse. She was the nurse who was tied up at the beginning of the film. And of course, what about Antonio Foscarelli, the character who we were like, what exactly is his role in this film? Well, as it turns out, he was the chauffeur
that was driven off the road during the kidnapper's escape.
Yeah. And what about Edward Masterman? He was actually the Batman of Colonel Armstrong during the war, and a valet when they were in New York together.
Not that kind of Batman, though it does make me wonder what this kind of Batman is.
Yes, it's a service, like a servant, because there was actually the Arbuthnot and Poirot had a conversation about that, where essentially Arbuthnot had an Indian servant, but also claimed that Colonel Armstrong had one as well. But Poirot, he knows about these things, and he points out during the reveal that, listen, commissioned officers in the English army who are serving in India, they don't have Indian servants. They have English servants, which is what tips him off to Masterman. Because I believe Masterman is caught in a contradiction where he claims he doesn't know, or he never went to New York, but later on accidentally reveals that he was in New York at one point, alongside Helena Andronish, who also accidentally reveals that, despite her earlier claims of not having gone to New York, she had gone to New York. So a lot of moving parts here, but it's all coming together. And then
what really first tips Poirot off is Hector McQueen.
Yeah,
who admits to having a close relationship with Sonia Armstrong as the son of the Armstrongs' lawyer.
Basically,
he looked at Sonia as a mother figure.
And essentially what happened is that his father was the Armstrongs' lawyer, but because of what happened with Cassetti getting off, the lawyer was basically disgraced, essentially. And so McQueen, his whole family suffered for it because of Cassetti getting off. And so he loved Sonia. He saw Sonia Armstrong as a mother figure, but he also wanted revenge for his father as well.
And that leaves us with two other of the potential suspects. How are they connected to the Armstrong murder?
Well, as it happened, Cyrus Hardman, well, he's not a member of the Pinkertons. In fact, he is actually an ex-cop, as he claims, but he's not a member of the Pinkertons. As it happens, he fell in love with a certain French maid,
Suzanne Michel,
who had killed herself. And that leads to Pierre Michel, who is the father of the maid who had killed herself. And so all the pieces come together, and so Poirot essentially reveals everyone did it.
Everybody killed Cassetti.
Which, for those who, at the time, this would have been a monster reveal. I can't imagine how many people's minds would have been blown by this. Would have been like, wait, everyone did it? What the fuck?
And the movie even goes as far as to showing everybody except for Helena stabbing him.
Yeah, Helena actually
She's the only person who doesn't actually stab him, but she is present when her husband does.
Correct. And so they both count as one. And so Poirot, at the end of this grand explanation, he goes to President Bulk, Monsieur Bulk, and he says, there it is, my two working theories. One, the very simple one, and the complicated one. Now, all things being equal, he invokes a razor law, a logical razor here. And
an Occam's razor.
Occam's razor. All things being equal, the simplest answer is more likely to be the truth. And so he goes, listen, it's your train. You're in charge of this. You asked me to do the investigation. I leave this in your hands. But, all things being equal, my opinion is that somebody snuck aboard the train, killed him, and left. And his reasoning is like, everyone here, he doesn't outright say it. It's heavily implied from him than anything.
Like, if the actual truth of this incident were to be revealed, it would cause a hell of a lot of problems for everyone involved.
It would be an international scandal, as it were. And
that would potentially ruin everybody's lives, all because they killed a child murderer.
Yeah.
Who indirectly resulted in the deaths of people that were close to them.
And so, so Poirot is basically saying they had justification. I'm willing to let sleeping dogs lie if you are my good friend, and I heavily put pressure on you that you should do as I say.
Though he does admit that it does leave him with a faint feeling of guilt about the whole thing, because
yeah, he's guilty because he's a world famous detective. It's his job to seek the truth and to see those that have done an injustice have justice done to them. But he also understands sometimes you have to break that rule. Sometimes the ends do justify the means. And so, Bulk agrees with his friend, Detective Poirot. And so he decides to go with the simple theory, because him and Poirot reason, not only because of everything that you had just lined out, but also because the police in Bucharest are more likely to accept that story than the one where everyone did it. Which would require
a ton of extra legwork on their part.
Exactly. And so it's easier to just let it go.
It's easier for them to search to try and find some enigmatic person that doesn't actually exist than have to deal with all these people.
To have to deal with 13 people, 13 people complicit in a murder, rather than just the one.
And the kind of ironic thing about this whole situation, the entire reason why their murder plot kind of goes sideways is because Poirot is there.
Yeah.
Like they end up having to hastily come up with their own excuses to try and throw Poirot off the scent, which ultimately brings him right back onto it.
And so all the characters, they're all relieved and everything, and Poirot, he looks back on this and he ultimately decides I did the right thing here, and he decides to close close the book on this chapter of his life, which is the end of the movie and the end of the book. And God, what an ending though. All things considered, you might think like, oh, that's an anticlimax or whatever, but it's like that's not the point. The point is that justice in the end was done, and nobody else needs to suffer for it. It's better to just let it be. It's not an anticlimax. It's actually a very reasonable.
It's incredibly satisfying. Like I've said a few times before, this ending is complicated but not convoluted. Like, yeah. by the end of Poirot's explanation, you understand how everybody is complicit in the murder in a way that is incredibly satisfying.
Exactly. Especially like Michel's revenge is very satisfying because I believe he's the last one to stab Cassetti. And his is very satisfying because he says it's for his daughter, whereas everybody else, everybody else has their own reasons, but for him it's just he wants revenge for his daughter's death, which was caused by this scumbag. Pretty simple. I mean, yeah, and Linda Arden, or
what's her name?
Mrs. Hubbard, Linda Arden, we'll just go with that. And she masterminded the whole thing. And it tracks. She is a master actress. Of course, she could play a pretty simple character. And you might be asking, well, what about the torn suit and the kimono? Those were intentionally red herrings. They were meant to throw Poirot off, but he was one step ahead. When the kimono thing happened, I think that was at the point where he realized that the suit was also a red herring, because he had been so focused on okay, who could have worn the suit, that he didn't stop to think that maybe they were intentionally left clues to throw him off track. I think the kimono was the one part where, because he starts laughing when he sees it, I think that's when he realized, they almost had me. They almost had me. Not this time. And so
he just happens to find it.
Yeah, it's left in his room. Nevertheless, that's the end of the film. 8 out of 10. Mm-hmm. A very satisfying film. I highly recommend everybody go out and watch it at least once. And they did do a remake, and that one is also very star-studded. I mean, it had... God, I'm trying to think. I think it had Dame Maggie Smith. It had... who's the other James Bond?
Daniel Craig?
It had Daniel Craig on it. I think he played Poirot. I actually have to look this up.
No, somebody else played Poirot.
They had a couple of 2017 film. It was
there was also a 2001 TV.
Oh, there was version. There was a 2001.
Judi Dench, John Depp.
Yeah, Willem Dafoe.
Kenneth Branagh played Poirot in this.
Okay, Michelle Pfeiffer. I mean, hell.
Daisy Ridley. I mean, she's a relative newcomer.
Yeah.
This, but
Tom Bateman. A lot of great characters. All things like Derek Jacobi as well. He's another very famous stage actor, especially. Yeah, I mean, I just highly recommend watching any of them. They're all really good. Most adaptations of the film are really good, but this one and the 2017 film, I would say, are the two definitive versions. But that is enough for Murder on the Orient Express for us. The next time that we're going to be doing a Hercule Poirot one, we're going to be doing Murder on the Nile, which is also star-studded, for different reasons. It has your and our good friend, who, from Murder, She Wrote.
Angela Lansbury?
Yes, it has.
Nice.
Yes, it has Angela Lansbury.
I'm looking forward to this.
It has who plays a drunkard, by the way. So it's gonna be great.
She plays a wonky drunkard in Murder, She Wrote.
Yes. Also in this one.
Although, admittedly, in Murder, She Wrote, she was faking it, but
That's true. That is true.
she played it convincing enough to catch the bad guy.
Huzzah! Hold on, give me a second. I'm trying to. It also has David Niven, who you remember Herbie the Love Bug?
Vaguely.
Yeah. He was also in.
The Absent-Minded Professor?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah,
I probably recognize him more from that.
Oh, he was also in the Pink Panther, the original film. He's in a lot of films, actually. He's really good.
We should cover the Pink Panther at some point.
Yeah. Hell yeah, I definitely.
So I don't know about any of the sequels or the remake, but definitely the original.
It's got Dame Maggie Smith in it. Who's nowadays is Dame Maggie Smith. She's very much famous for Downton Abbey and, of course, Harry Potter.
Okay.
Yeah, Professor McGonagall. Peter Ustinov is also in it. Like an older Betty Davis. Like,
I mean, come on, man. Wait until we actually do the podcast. Don't reveal everybody.
Mia Farrow, even. Anyways, no, a lot of. Yeah, that one's also really star-studded, and honestly, you can't really go wrong with either of those films. But as we mentioned earlier, this one is the hallmark of whodunits. This and the Hounds of Baskervilles, both are hallmarks of whodunit films, and both are highly recommended. And so when we come back to do our next film, we will be doing another Hercule Poirot film.
I think the next film we'll be covering will be my choice. But after that.
Okay, all right, after that. The next Hercule Poirot film that we do is Murder on the Nile.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Now I have to figure out which movie we're covering next that isn't Hercule Poirot.
Damn. Decisions. We'll just do the remake. No, we'll just do the remake. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So with that said, I suppose we better be heading on out.
All right. I'm ProtoMet.
I'm Barry.
See ya.
Bye.